Good afternoon and welcome to the ILR School at Cornell University. My name is Christy Avgar. I'm the Director of Graduate Enrollment and Student Services here at the ILR School. We're excited to be here today to talk to you about our MILR program and HR. So before we get started, I just want to let you know that we will be taking questions throughout the live webcast. So please feel free to submit your questions as we go through the presentation, and at the end we will be taking additional questions as well as answering those we've received during the webcast. I want to encourage you, if you do have a question, to submit it using your email address and not submit it anonymously. That way, if we do not get to your question during our webcast today, we can follow up with you at a later date. So welcome. Joining me today is Professor Chris Collins. He's an Associate Professor of Human Resource Studies here at the ILR School and is currently the Director of Graduate Studies for our MILR program. So Chris is here with us today to talk a little bit about the curriculum as well as what the student experience is like for our students here in the MILR program. So Chris.
Great, thank you, Christy. So just going to jump right into this because I know we've got a little bit of time sensitivity. So one of the things that we've done here over the last decade or so in the HR Studies Department at ILR is we've worked with a number of our companies that belong to our Center for Advanced HR Studies, interviewed chief HR officers, interviewed senior HR leaders, interviewed CEOs, interviewed senior business line leaders to really try and understand what this job is of the HR leader. What do they really expect from HR leaders in role? And we came to this model that really we hope starts to define what are the key tasks, key responsibilities, what are the things that are expected of HR leaders. And to me, it really breaks down into at least 5 big categories. And so the first of these is what do leaders expect from HR leaders that sit on their team is really their involvement, participation, having a point of view on the strategy of the organization in which they work, right? So they really expect those HR leaders to come to the table, to offsite meetings, to planning meetings, and really be part of this strategy discussion. So where is the company going to go? Where are we trying to move as an organization? Who are our customers? How are we trying to create value for them? Post that then is really to think through the role from an HR leader seat in terms of helping to support the execution of that strategy once the organization has decided where it's headed. So really then the movement here is to have that HR leader be able to translate the strategy of the organization into a human capital or employee plan, right? So how do we get the strategy to come to life? The other big part that I think leaders or HR leaders in particular play in this strategy space is really helping to make sure that the team that they help to support, the team that they sit on as the senior leadership group at whatever level, the plant, the organization as a whole, the larger corporation, really is to make sure that the leaders in that team have diverse perspectives, bring diverse work experiences so that we don't get stuck as an organization in repeating mistakes based on having not enough people with different ideas or perspectives, right? So with that diversity on a team, you also have to think about, well, how is that team functioning together as a team? So really starting to think through what are the team dynamics, how do we make sure we've got the right people on this team to make the best possible decisions? So that's the first big chunk of what I think of this role. Second big chunk is really then thinking about, well, what's the role of HR to help create and support the organizational culture or the climate of a particular work group? We're really thinking through, what are the norms for how we work here? How do we support one another? How do people work in tandem? Really those ideas of culture, climate, of kind of being the norms of how we behave here as employees and leaders in this organization. So HR leaders play a pretty big role in thinking through how to evaluate where we are against that culture goal, what do we need to change or move towards, how do we do that, how do we put in place the right kinds of practices, leaders, and systems to make sure people understand what is the culture, what are the norms, what are the expectations. So that's a second big bucket. The third one is really to think about your role as a coach and advisor to leaders, right? So as leaders try and think about how to manage employees, how to create a vision, how to share with them the directions, how to give feedback, many times those leaders are fairly inexperienced at doing those things, right? They may have come up and been a good technician in their role, they understand the technical part of the role. What they don't always understand so well is how to actually lead. So a big role for HR leaders is really that coaching and advisory role for the leaders and the team they sit on, right? So how do I give them feedback? How do I help them think through performance discussions? How do I help them think through coaching discussions with their own team members? How do I point out to them where they've got some opportunities for improvement or some weaknesses that may prevent them from reaching the next level that they want to reach as a leader, right? So really thinking through that dynamics of the interpersonal part of how do I help leaders, how do I help managers become more effective in their job? The fourth part of that then is outside of the role of developing leaders, we also play a pretty big role in thinking about the development of the talent inside the organization. So that could be technical talent, it could be frontline talent, engineers, scientists, nurses, teachers, whatever the organization is you sit in, is really thinking through how do we help develop their skills and capabilities so they can do the work that's in front of them better? How do we help them transition to the new way we're going to do things or new technology that we've introduced? So really continuously thinking through how do we have the right people in the organization? How do we make sure that they've got the right skills to do the job? How do we help them continue to develop and kind of be able to pursue new tasks or opportunities or roles over time? So really thinking through that big piece of development. The last part, which probably underpins much of this, is this ability to drive and support organizational change, right? So most of you realize just how fast things are moving in the world. So, you know, there's a new iPhone every 2 minutes, it feels like, right? So if that's true, you can start thinking that every time that organization is introducing a new product, facing a new competitor, moving into a new market, moving into a new country, they've got to start doing things differently, right? So a big part of the role of HR leaders is to support leaders, employees, the organization as a whole, as it moves towards this new change or new outcome or new set of goals. So those are the big 5 tasks for me. Underlying that is we start to think about, well, what are then the key capabilities? What's the underlying knowledge, skills, ability, acumen that an HR leader has to have to be successful, which led us to create the MILR competency model, right? So for our Cornell MILRs who are trying to go into HR roles, who want to become HR leaders in organizations, we started to think through, well, what are the big buckets of knowledge, experience, understanding that they have to have? And so lump these into 4 big buckets again that go against those 5 key tasks for HR leaders. The first of these is what we think of as technical expertise, right? So how do we make sure that when you walk out of this program, you've got the deep understanding of the basics of HR, the processes of HR, the functional areas of HR in order to design the right solutions, whether that's around talent, leadership, change, culture, right? So there's lots of levers you can pull. So do you have the basic understanding of how those things work? What are the underlying theories? What's best-in-class practices around these areas? So that could be compensation, it could be staffing, it could be diversity inclusion, HR analytics, negotiation. So lots of core skills that you want to have so you make sure that you can drive the right solutions for companies. The second big bucket is what we think of as business acumen. So can we make sure that you know and understand what your organization's trying to achieve, how it's trying to achieve that, what are the financial constraints of the organization, operationally, how would they execute this strategy and vision? Because the more you know what your organization has to do, the better insight you have in terms of your own viewpoint on strategy, but certainly also the viewpoint of what are the critical roles, what are the critical functions that are really going to drive and help to execute this business and the business outcomes. Third then is certainly as you start to think about yourself as a leader, right? So you're not just an HR leader, but you're probably going to have a team beneath you. Certainly as you grow up in the ranks and become a higher level HR leader, you're going to have more and more teams. You may have leaders reporting to you who have their own teams eventually. So you have to start thinking about how do you develop your own competencies as a leader? So critical thinking, ability to solve problems, how do you collaborate and work with others, your ability to create vision and communicate that vision, having a global perspective, being flexible and constantly learning. All those are part of what we see as general leadership capabilities. Maybe the most important one then that seems to really differentiate those people who really take off in their careers seem to be those competencies around what does it take to be an actual HR leader, right? So things around how do I think about developing a strategy for the function? How do I think about putting an HR strategy in place that helps to execute the business strategy? How do I have the courage to push back on leaders when they're not doing things the way they should? How do I take a strong viewpoint around the ethics, the morals of the organization, and really push leaders to understand what the implications are for decisions they're making? How do I build relationships with those leaders? How do I coach? How do I influence? Developing consulting skills? How do I think about politics and team dynamics? So to us, what we're looking to help you build as you come here as a student is to think through, where are these areas do you already have strengths? Where do you have areas for improvement? Where could you really use and leverage courses or experiences here to build the capabilities you need to become the kind of HR leader that you want to be? And so we've then taken that model and kind of fleshed it out against the program here to say, well, how do we make sure we're building those HR leaders of the future? And the first action we really took around this was to create what we call the bundle. So the bundle is a first semester set of courses that really help to connect all of these things together. So taking a class on strategy and finance to really understand what's the organization trying to do, what's the challenges the organization faces, connecting that with a course on organizational behavior where you really start to think about what are the underlying leadership issues here, what's the culture issues, what are the org structure or design issues, what are the employee motivational issues that might be tied to executing this business strategy. And then really the last of those courses is an HR strategy and HR special topics course, which really helps you start to think through, well, now that I see what the organization's trying to do, I start to see the people challenges, can I start to craft an HR strategy that pulls on diversity, inclusion, and learning, and staffing, and compensation to design a solution to help drive the organization to the outcomes it's trying to achieve? From that first semester, then you've got lots of chance for choice, right? To really start to fill in for you, what are the special topic areas that are a weakness for you, where you don't have deep knowledge that you could use more? So we've got a bunch of electives on things like HR analytics, a course on compensation, a course on executive compensation, at least 1 or 2 courses on creating a diverse work environment, an inclusive work environment, courses on learning and employee development, courses on HR consulting, on organizational design and structure, mergers and acquisitions, global perspectives on HR. If you're looking for more business acumen besides the initial course on finance and strategy, we partner with the Johnson MBA program and the hotel school on campus that have lots of master's courses on finance, operations management, accounting, marketing to help fill in some of those. We also bring in a lot of external guest speakers. We have roundtable events. We've got special executive talks to bring in and expose you to more information on what's the latest and greatest happening out in the world of practice, expose you to leaders from great companies who are doing really interesting things in the HR space. So lots of ways for you to really build out against that competency model to make sure in the 2 years you're here, you're really getting to deeply steep yourself in those kinds of capabilities, knowledge that are important for your career. In the end, what I think of, there's lots of great programs out there that offer master's programs. I think some of the key differentiators for us at Cornell, one is just the pure size of the faculty. So we've got 12 faculty in the HR studies department. We have another 9 or 10 who teach organizational behavior. What does that mean? It means it gives you lots of exposure to lots of different topics. So we tend to have somewhere in the range of 8 to 10 different elective courses every year to choose from, which means you probably can't possibly take all of those. It's going to force you to really think through against that competency model. Where could you use the most help? Where do you want to have the most development? Where do you want to take your career? And how do you craft the curriculum that's the best fit for you? So that size of faculty really translates into choice and customization of the program for your career as an individual. The second big takeaway, I think, is really the community itself of the students that you're working with. Right? So your first year, the second year students are great mentors. You're building great relationships with them. You're building relationships with the first year students you come in with. Eventually you become a second year and a mentor to the new first years. That community are groups of people that you're going to be working with, interacting, getting support from, advice, potentially future jobs from for the rest of your life, right? So the beauty is we keep the program relatively small. So somewhere in the range of 40, maybe 50 new HR students each year. Against, again, the size of that faculty gives you lots of chance to interact with one another, build strong relationships with the folks the year before you, the year after you, really build the network that you're going to have for the rest of your life. The third thing to me then is this ability that I mentioned around talking to, hearing from, interacting, meeting, and building relationships with current leading practitioners. So it's not just a theory-driven program, it's intensely developed around what do leaders actually face, how are they doing this, how are they reacting to some of these challenges, what do they think are important skills for you to develop. So you really get that chance to build those relationships, interview, meet with them, talk to them. The fourth part then is just how long we've been doing this. So this is about year 40 for the MILR program, which means that there's a huge history of classes that are out before you, strong affiliation with the school. There's also a really large undergraduate HR population. Last I looked, there are something like 22 of the Fortune 500 heads of HR are Cornell alumni. I think the next closest school that we saw when we did that work was a school that had 2 alumni, right? So that tells you a little bit about where those leaders sit. What I also know is it's probably closer to about 75 or 85% of the Fortune 500 have some person on their senior HR leadership team that came from Cornell, right? Which tells you again about the spread of the network, how many people you can connect with, which has spillover both in terms of access to knowledge, access to coaching and mentoring, but also potentially long-term career opportunities. The last one I think is important is relative to other schools. We've got a lot more companies that come here on campus to do recruiting. So they come here for maybe because they're an alum, maybe because their boss is an alum, but we tend to have somewhere in the range of 35 to 45 companies coming on campus, many of them for internships looking for 2 or more students. If you start to add up those numbers, it probably translates into 150 plus opportunities against the 40 or 50 students who are in the MILR program. I think what that translates to is, again, you get the chance to find the kind of company that you want to work for. That might be by industry, it could be by geography, it could be by culture, it could be by the mission or purpose of the organization. And it also leads to an environment where the students are supportive of one another, helping each other practice for interviews, helping each other prepare for interviews, rather than competing for the 2 or 3 good companies that may come somewhere else, right? So this job opportunity thing, having so many employers coming here really translates again into choice, but more importantly into a supportive community rather than a community that is competing with one another. So again, the overall, what do I take from this? Why Cornell is really, I think that's a chance to craft and shape the program. That's about you, it's about your career aspirations, and not about us just minting a whole bunch of people that look exactly the same. So really I think about this idea of, you come to Cornell because it's a chance to create the program that's the right fit for your own future in the field. So I think with that, we'll turn it over to some questions and start to, make this a little bit more interactive.
Great, thank you, Chris. I think that gives us the people watching a really good bird's eye view of curriculum and all the things that the MILR program has to offer in the HR space if their interest is in human resources organizations and pursuing that concentration. So we have a question about what's the sort of interface or balance, given that the MILR is a professional degree program, with research and theory and practice, right? Those skills that they're really going to need to begin to develop those competencies to go out and be a successful HR leader.
Yeah, so I think there's the beauty of this program is that it is built on the combination of those, right? So the idea is that you've got world-class faculty who are leaders in the academic world in terms of research, theory creation, theory development. So a lot of the courses, or most of them, are built off of that as a foundation of really what is the latest, greatest research and knowledge on this topic. Underlying that, they often have somewhere between 3 to 5 guest speakers, depending on the course, where we're bringing in leading practitioners to bring in the leading edge of what the practice is on that. So you get the combination of what's theory, what's the research say, but also how do practitioners do this. I think on top of that, there's also embedded in many of the courses, there's cases, role plays, exercise, where it's not just learn the theory and regurgitate it in a multiple choice test, but it's learn theories, learn the concepts, but now think through that in the context of different kinds of organizations and how might it play out in different contexts of industry, types of employees, business challenges in different parts of the world. So it becomes much more theory, practice, integration, and practice of how to do it as a future leader.
And when you talk about case projects, can you give an example of sort of a case problem or a case project that MILRs might become I would say just begin to face in the classroom, or that might come up as a topic that you begin to work through? And how do you begin to work through that case project, sort of looking at it from different angles? What does that sort of real world problem or HR problem look like?
So great example. So this semester, as part of the bundle, we always do a larger case that goes with it to try to take the 3 courses, the concepts from the 3 courses, and bundle them together in a way that you have to use all 3 to solve a case. So this semester, we just kicked it off last night, as a matter of fact. So Procter & Gamble is here as the company sponsor of the case. The case really involves for them, here's a time where, as a big company in the consumer products goods space, they've been super successful. They've been around 187 years, I think they said last night. But what they face is a lot of really small companies who are super nimble, who are able to access consumers in ways that no one could have done before, right? So 10 years ago, if you're a new company trying to get access to customers, you had to try and find shelf space somewhere, right? At a Walmart or a Target or a convenience store, somehow you had to get shelf space. Now, it's all direct to consumer, right? So you can launch a new product, you can make that product potentially in your garage, create a website, and suddenly you've got access to customers, right? So what P&G has seen is competition coming from everywhere that they've never seen it before, and they have to become much better at becoming innovative. So one of the big challenges that they put in front of the students is, so how does a big company become entrepreneurial? So they gave them ideas of what are some of the things they're currently doing, what are their challenges, and now the students will go off working in teams to try and figure out, well, what is the business goal? What's P&G really trying to do? How much of the company is trying to be innovative? What are the people challenges behind that? So will leaders have to behave differently? Is culture part of this? Is it organizational structure? And then start to tie in the HR piece. So how do we think about attracting new talent? How do we think about retraining or redeveloping our existing talent? How do we free them up with different performance management tools? What would this mean in terms of compensation? And they'll pitch that back out to the faculty in P&G at the end of the term, right? So that's an example of how do we bring these cases in to really force students to apply this, think through it from a real world perspective. So the answer is no one knows, because P&G is exactly facing this problem right now. What P&G is hoping for is some great examples, some great ideas that the students bubble up so that they can maybe take some of those ideas forward, right? So it's a great chance to say, there is no answer. We don't know what the right answer is, nor would you if you were the HR leader, so now go to it and see what you can do.
Okay. And when your students are thinking about, we have a question, we have students who begin to face whether or not as they're doing their research, they're seeing MBA programs who have opportunities for them to study HR within an MBA program. And then they see the MILR, which also has this robust curriculum that's built out against HR. And really trying to decide and weigh the factors of, where do I fit? Sort of what's the program for me? So can you talk a little bit about how the MILR would set someone up for success if they want to pursue HR, and how are the ways that are the unique aspects or features of this program that they might find more beneficial to go in the direct route of a MILR versus an MBA program?
Good question. I think we hear that all the time from students or from prospective students. I think one of the things I'd push them toward is to go back to that competency model, right? And so if prospective students looking at that competency model, and they're like, yeah, got all the stuff in the top left box. I know everything I could possibly know about HR. I have all these competencies, whether that's about HR strategy, coaching, influence, understanding politics. And what I'm really missing is all the business stuff. Then they're probably a better fit for a business school anyways, because all they need is deep dive of business acumen, because they've got all the HR stuff covered. My experience is there's not many of those people out there. There are great schools out there, right? So there's lots of good schools. I think that's the beauty of the position they're in, is to choose. So I would just push them to say, well, where are your gaps, and who's the best place to fill in those gaps for me, right? And so I do think that the beauty of what we bring is lots of intense coverage of the HR knowledge base of the comp and diversity, inclusion, and learning, and all those kinds of things in the top left box. And then courses that really kind of hone in on that bottom left box of leadership, with access to lots of other courses that if you've got gaps on the business acumen side or some of the leadership side, then maybe there's other courses and other programs on campus that fill that in. So I think our target is people that deeply want to get into HR. They know they have some of those competencies in the two left boxes, but lots of gaps, and really come here because of the breadth of courses. So again, I would push any of you to really take the time, again, evaluate yourself against that competency model, really try to think through what are your big gaps and where would you benefit most, and then go look at the other programs, right? So do they offer the courses that you want in those areas? My concern with most business schools, because I came out of a business school, is there tend to be 1 or 2 or maybe 3 faculty that do HR stuff. And so there's typically a great intro course and then maybe 1 or 2 specialized courses, but they're fairly limited in terms of the depth of those 2 left sides of the competency model.
Okay. So your advice would also be to look at then the course roster, see what those course offerings are for those programs, and see what school has the programs, the courses that you're most interested in, or would feel like that you could really begin to build out your competency or your skills. Yeah,
I mean, so if I were a student or prospective student, I'd want to know at least 2 things. So one is, what can I learn here, right? So what's the array of courses? What's the choice I have, and can I mold this program to be about where I want to go and what I want to do? The second one, it's certainly just from a pure career perspective, is who are the kinds of employers that are coming there, right? How many, what kind of choice, how much variability do I see in terms of being able to compare? If I don't know which industry I want to be in, are there enough companies where I could go to the company presentations, talk to leaders from those companies, get a sense of which industry is better or which kind of culture is better. So that kind of choice. I would also look at the alumni piece and really say, as I go out there, this job of an HR leader gets harder and harder. So, are there alums out there that I can build relationships with, that can become mentors, coaches? How big is the class around me? Is it so big that I'm not going to develop any relationships? Is it too small that I'm going to leave here and I'm only going to have one person that I can talk to? Or is it big enough where I can really find the people that are really going to be with me for the rest of my life and support me throughout my career, right? Whether that's for advice, just for pure commiseration and giving each other a hug now and again that everything's okay, or if it's about opportunities at their organizations, right? So I'd be looking at those kinds of things and just saying, then what's the right program for me? Because I don't think there is one right program, but I think there are probably programs that are a better fit or better for you than others.
Great. And so thinking about that student who, again, has this interest in HR, but maybe they have this new interest, right? It's something that as they've graduated from their undergraduate degree and started to enter the job market, have found themselves in this HR space or found an interest in the HR space, but might not have the experience, right? Or several years experience under their belt. How would you, what advice would you give to them, or how would you tell them to prepare for a program like the MILR? And how would they, in the classroom, be able, what information or what experiences would they be able to share or contribute when people are working on a case presentation that might have more experience than them?
Yeah, so I'll break that down in at least a couple ways, right? So first, I think one of the things that's nice about this place is we try to build in diversity, right? So if we only brought in people that had come in with 4 to 5 years of experience from a certain kind of company, I think the classroom learning would be pretty stale. So what we've always looked for in the 20 years I've been around here is some mix of the student body, right? So some are people that have been out working in HR for, 3 to 6 years, let's say, have come from organizations where they've done really good HR stuff, and they're looking for some career acceleration, right? They're trying to grow into a bigger HR role somewhere else. And so they come back here for that. Others are what you mentioned, they've been out working, but in non-HR fields, right? So they could be in operations. We've seen them come from sales and marketing, from consulting, from basic frontline management roles. And they come here as a career switcher, right? So they're really trying to figure out, how do I get into HR? And so they come here for the curriculum content exposure to build the skills on that side that complement the other skills they got from working. Then there's a third profile that comes basically straight from undergrad. Maybe they've got 1 year of experience. And we bring them in because they've got fresh perspective from school. They've had great learning at the undergrad universities they've been at. And they're trying to build the additional acumen so they can get into the HR world as HR leaders in the future, right? So each of them come with different perspectives, and I think what's the nice thing about the classroom is those different perspectives bring very different views to a case because they see it from different angles. I think a lot of this is just being able to bring what your experience is to any particular discussion we have. So I do teach this HR leadership class where we do lots of role plays, exercises around how do you coach a senior leader, or how do you handle this difficult situation, how could you take a courageous stand, how would you drive change here? And what's super interesting is that difference of viewpoint often helps people see corners that they hadn't seen from their perspective of who they were, right? So I think the beauty is that no matter who you are, you bring some unique set of experiences that lends learning to somebody else in the classroom.
Okay, great, thanks. We also have a question about the Center for Advanced Human Resource Studies. So that exists here at the ILR school. What are students' opportunities to engage or become involved in any type of research or opportunities where companies might be coming on to campus that are a part of the Center for Advanced Human Resource Studies?
So I would say one of the great competitive advantages of the ILR school in this HR space is the center, right? So the Center for Advanced HR Studies is a little over 30 years old now, and it was created by two of my predecessors who really saw the need to make sure that there's not this just pure academic view of HR. And, you know, Ithaca is somewhat centrally isolated, as we say, that there's not a whole lot of corporations that are headquartered here in Ithaca, in fact, none. So it's really that idea of, you know, how do we make sure that the practitioners are interacting with, or our academics are interacting with practitioners, so we're teaching the latest things, we're focused on the latest problems that HR functions of the world are really facing today, so that the practitioners help to influence what we research and think about. We do lots of meetings where the faculty get to go out and interact with leading people in their areas from these different companies. So I'm going to be in Minnesota next week. We're doing a working group around the topic of space design. So what do spaces look like that people work in, from the entryways to their desks to the environment in which they work, to really understand like what is the role of space architectural design in how people engage with each other, communicate information, feel engaged to the company. So that's the kind of thing that I can now bring back to the classroom. So that has a huge impact on students, right? So we're researching things that are important, we're hearing from companies and bringing back live examples. CARS also then filters in lots of the guest speakers that we have. So you're getting speakers from, you know, a handful of the 60 leading HR companies in the world that are partner companies of CARS. We also do student events to interact with those sponsors. So we did the roundtable event this couple weeks ago where we had in 22 or so HR executives ranging from chief HR officers to heads of talent to heads of comp, where the executives rotate around to different tables, meet with students in small groups of 5 or 6, talking about what are the challenges they face, what are the issues of the future for the function, what are key competencies or skills, and students can ask them lots of questions. It filters into the event that's going on today, which is the Human Capital Association event. So the head of HR for Procter & Gamble is talking about innovation. Then there's a panel of HR leaders from other organizations talking about what does innovation look at their company, and how does the HR function help to support that. And they've got breakout sessions all afternoon with these leaders to do it in smaller group sessions with them. So I think there's lots of ways to interact. We also tend to hire, you know, somewhere between 3 and 5 students as research assistants for CARS every year. So some students actually get to take that to a higher level of actually working on research. That tends to be benchmarking research. They're calling companies, doing interviews, focus groups to collect data on the topic and then present it back out to the company. So there's different levels of involvement. The last one's pretty limited because we only have so many students we can support in a given time, given our budget and resources, but different ways.
Okay. Another question we have from someone is they're really trying to understand as they're looking at job descriptions and thinking about what they want to do after a program like the MILR, is they're seeing project manager positions and they're seeing HR manager positions. And they wondered if you could talk a little bit about how those two might be different positions or what might be the defining characteristics of those. I'm
not sure I know the answer to that question. So project manager I don't see very often for HR people. There's at least a couple career paths I can see within HR, right? So one is what we think of as HR business partners, HR generalists. So these are the folks that are working out in the business. They're sitting on a leadership team for a business unit or a division, or maybe a piece of the business like the sales team or the R&D team. And so that HR leader is really there to sit with the leadership team to talk through what is their strategy, what's their vision, where are they trying to go, what are the talent challenges, what are the underlying leadership challenges, what's the succession look like for the leadership team, right? So they're embedded in the business to really be working on business problems. They then can partner with what we think of as the folks in the centers of excellence. So that might be a center of excellence on compensation, on diversity inclusion, on learning and development, or it could be on staffing, where they can work with those specialists who can help them design practices, help support with activities, bringing in talent, creating learning programs, creating diversity and inclusion programs, creating benefits plans, whatever it is to help make sure we can attract, retain, and improve the performance of the folks inside the organization. So, you know, we tend to see our students go down one path or the other. Right? They either more attracted to being a specialist because they deeply love and want to do comp, or they're really into and really kind of are passionate about diversity and inclusion, or really passionate about learning and development. So some go down that specialist path. Others go down more the HR business partner path because they really value being out in the business, doing the coaching, doing the talent assessment of that role, right? So, and then some kind of go back and forth because they know at the very top of the organization to become a head of HR, you probably have had to have both experiences. So impossible to manage a group of specialists if your entire career you've always been a generalist. Hard to manage generalists and create a vision for them and inspire them if you've always been just a specialist. So some of our students who aspire to the very top levels of HR kind of do time in both worlds, and probably the best learning is when you've done both. So that's the two, you know, paths I see for HR.
Okay. So next question is, given that you've been here 20 years, as you referenced earlier, what do you sort of see as that growth arc for students as they begin the program and then graduate from the program? What do you see the successful students, what areas do you see them growing in? Is it gaining confidence? Is it just gaining familiarity with the material? Is it developing professional skills, such as the ability to network or give an elevator pitch about their interest in themselves and what they want to do? What does that growth arc look like for MILR students?
My answer to that is yes. So there's no growth arc because there's like a dozen growth arcs, right? So what's super, so I love my job, right, in case that wasn't clear, right? So yesterday, because of the event going on today, there was 5 alums that I knew pretty well over the years that were back on campus. One of those was someone who came straight through. She was a University of Michigan undergrad. She came through here wicked smart. She was a great student, but she didn't have experience. She really didn't know how to influence others. She was really great at putting her idea out there, but not so good at how do you bring other people along with that idea, right? So, you know, what I saw from her over those 2 years is really thinking through, okay, now how do I work in a team? How do I influence outside my areas of responsibility, get other people involved? How do I start to do that better? The second one came in here who was less sure about her skills and knowledge in HR, but super confident around how to work in teams and how to influence. Right, her arc was really around building the HR acumen to go with the business acumen that she came in with. Third was probably someone who I'd think of as not confident in presenting themselves. They came in a little bit unsure of like, am I good enough to be here? Can I really be a leader? And the arc I saw for him was really finding himself over the 2 years to know what was his passion, where did he see himself in the function, how did he know where he wanted to go, and really emerging as kind of the leader of his of class, right? So, you know, again, there's so many different arcs, right? That's the beauty, though, of this program, right, is that no matter where you start, it's figuring out where you want to be and how do you create your own arc to get to that end place. And, you know, some of this is that arc starts here. It's enhanced because the opportunities you get from coming here in those first set of roles that creates an arc past here, right? So the arcs are super interesting, right? And we're now starting to see that I've been here long enough that people who are here my first year, there's a whole bunch who are now heads of HR somewhere, or senior leaders of comp, senior leaders of learning, heads of talent, right? So we're really now starting to see where people are landing because they've had the time to kind of navigate their careers to get to those places.
Right. And what are those opportunities for students to engage with faculty and build those relationships, such as the ones you've described that you have with alums who've been in the program previously?
Yeah. So again, I think it's partly a size thing, right? So by keeping the program relatively small, we're not trying to maximize as to like how many butts can we cram in seats every year, but we're really trying to select to make sure people are coming here are coming for the right reasons, they're a good fit to the program overall, and that keeping the courses pretty small, right? So my HR leadership course tends to be about 25 students at a time. Get to really know students in a class that small, right? And so we also have taken the intro HR course, which could be as big as 50 or 60 depending on incoming class. And we've broken it into 2 sections so they're smaller rather than one big section, because again, it gives us more chance to get to know them, more chance for them to have voice in the classroom and talk about their own experience or perceptions on things. It gives them time because there's enough of us for them to find the faculty who might be the right fit for them as a mentor. And then some, it's just they stay connected, right? So there's lots of students I've had that I've never heard from again. No, hopefully it's not me, but they're busy, right? And so they've got lives, families, jobs, and some find it more important to come back and stay connected because they're here to recruit or they drop me a line. So everyone's different. Not everyone connects with me, right? So as sad as that might be, I think it's up to them partly to figure out what's the right fit for them.
And it sounds like the number of HR faculty that you have here at the ILR school, that they have the opportunity to find the faculty that have the same interests in them that they might connect with on in the areas of negotiation or compensation or work that might be outside of the work that you're doing.
That's right.
So they have those opportunities as well. Where do you see HR going? How do students, as they're thinking about applying here, as they're thinking about pursuing a program like this, where do you think that sort of the field is going in a way? How do they need to make sure that they're staying sort of on the cutting edge or in the forefront of the field, and it doesn't sort of pass them by? Or how can they stay ahead of that game?
Yeah, so the biggest change that's happening and will continue to happen is technology, right? So I think the beauty of why you come here for the degree is we're not teaching about, what is the technology today. We're teaching about the concepts, right? Then you can link back to why is this current technology useful or not. So it's really about the long-term concepts, and as much as things change, people haven't changed, right? Yes, things go faster. Now we've got cell phones and smartphones that 10 years ago we didn't have, but the human person has not changed, right? The human has not evolved in the last 10 years such that we suddenly want different things at work. We behave differently, our minds work right. The humans are still humans, and they're going to be humans for the next 50 years, right? So I think it's us training you on the concepts, the theories, how is that playing out today, and then I think it's on you as a alum to either stay connected to Cornell, stay connected to other things, keep reading, so that you're constantly updating yourself on maybe what the latest practices are. But I think the basic training here is going to transfer for a long time.
Great. And I think we have one last question about career opportunities for students who are either looking for an international experience or international students who are looking to go back to their home country and work in that HR space. What has been your experience with students as far as helping those students find what they're looking for?
So that's partly about the companies, right? So, most of the companies that come here are global in nature, right? So, when you start thinking about the larger employers that come here, almost all of them are in 50 to 100 or more countries. So they all have big global presence. So then it's about what you ask for, right? So no one gives you anything anymore, right? So if it's really important you have a global career, I think that happens better earlier than later, right? So asking if you go into a new college graduate rotation program and there's 3 rotations, can you ask for one of them to be global? Can you ask for chance to work on a global team if they can't send you on a global assignment, right? Because global assignments are honestly pretty expensive. But some of the companies that come to recruit here do include a global assignment because of the fact that they are a global company. Know if you don't get that early, you're probably not going to get it late. So, I think that's part about asking and pursuing what you want to do. I mean, they're clearly, the advantage of going to a big employer is they've got locations everywhere. It's then about how you manage your career and how you manage those discussions to make it happen.
Okay, great. So we want to thank you all for joining us today. We want to let you know that our application deadlines are coming up. If you're interested in joining us for the spring semester, which will start in January of 2020, the application deadline is October 15th, 2019, so in about 2 weeks. If you're interested in starting in the fall semester, fall of 2020, which would have you starting the program in August, then we have a round 1 deadline of December 15th. And then our round 2 deadline will be January 15th. So we want to encourage you to apply. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to us at ilrgradapplicant@cornell.edu. And I want to thank you again, Chris, so much for joining us today and talking with our prospective students about HR and the MILR program. So thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.